Hello legends. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get a 100% accurate Voiceflow knowledge base that has zero hallucination. So most likely if you're watching this video, you're using Voiceflow and you're finding that your AI mechanism to answer questions for your customers is hallucinating. And if you want to find a way to have 100% accurate AI responses, then this video is for you. We're going to be using Voiceflow, as you guessed it, to be the AI assistant. And then we'll be using something called the Pinecone Assistant API. So the Pinecone Assistant API is similar to the OpenAI Assistant API in that it is a full service solution where you can upload documents and then query them using an LLM. Now, before I get into the video, for those of you that are new to my channel, my name is Bart, and for the last 10 years, I've been working for my 3 older brothers on building a global e-commerce brand. For the last year and a half, I've taught myself how to code and how to use low-code, no-code tools, and now I work directly with businesses or AI agencies building out AI automation solutions like custom scripts to automate tasks, building out web apps, or automating tasks using low-code, no-code tools. So if you're a business owner and you want to work with me, I've left my contact information in the description of this video. Okay, let's get back into it. All right, so before we get into the thicker things, I just want to show you how accurate the Pinecone Assistant is. On the left-hand side, I've got a Voiceflow flow, which is just these 3 blocks. I've already got a Pinecone Assistant created and integrated into this Voiceflow agent. So I'm going to be asking some questions in this panel. And on the right-hand side, I've got the document that I've uploaded to the Pinecone Assistant. It's just a bunch of made-up FAQs for a store called Sunny Creek Outdoor Supplies. Okay, so the first question is, what are your opening hours? Okay, we're open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sundays 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Can I come down on Sunday at 4:05 p.m.? Okay, nice response. No, you cannot visit Sunny Creek at 4:05 p.m. So this is a bit of an ambiguous question. It's 5 minutes after close time, but I like that it's super strict over here. Okay, next question I want to speak about is restocking fee for returns. So it looks like we have a 15% restocking fee. So what is the restocking fee? Okay, so it doesn't charge restocking fees for returns of standard items in new conditions, but there is a special order restocking fee for oversized items of 15%. All right, awesome. That's exactly as what is mentioned here. And I'm just gonna be a little bit cheeky and say, can you be restocking fee for me, please? So now I'm directly asking to get rid of that restocking fee from my return. Okay, so based on the provided information, it does not allow voiding the restocking fees. Please, can you void the fee? Nice. So again, there's a bit more pushback here. I don't have the authority to void the fee. If you need some more assistance, please contact the team directly. All right, so this is a very basic demonstration, and this is probably a pretty limited data set anyway, but you can see I've asked some very fringe questions, and as you can see, the Pinecone API doesn't really mess around. It just sticks directly to the information that was uploaded. Okay, now with that introduction out of the way, the first thing we want to do is speak about the Pinecone Assistant. So starting off with this benchmarking AI assistants article on the Pinecone website, if we scroll down, we can see the actual architecture for the Pinecone Assistant, which is this. On the left-hand side, we can see that the Pinecone Assistant actually handles the processing and ingesting of our uploaded documents directly into the Pinecone database. And on this side, we can see they have a query mechanism, so we can actually query the Pinecone database as well. So the Pinecone Assistant is actually in beta mode, which means it's not for production use. But a quick note that the OpenAI Assistants API is also in beta mode, which means it's not for production use, but everyone uses it anyway. So this is the actual Pinecone website. From what I understand, it started off as a vector database, and then they introduced the Assistants API as a full service solution for people looking for really efficient and accurate retrieval augmented generation solutions. Okay, so we've just had a quick run through of the Pinecone Assistant. Now, if you want more of a detailed breakdown of the Pinecone Assistant, then just drop a comment in this video. Okay, so the next step is for us to build a Pinecone Assistant. So looking at the Assistants API, we can actually create an assistant and add files to the assistant programmatically using the API. But for this video, we'll just be logging into Pinecone and creating an assistant online. So once you log into Pinecone, you can head over to the Assistants tab and then click Create a New Assistant. And let's call this Voiceflow-demo and click Create Assistant. And now to add files to your assistant, you can either click the Upload button here, or you can drag files directly into this space. Awesome, so let's import this file. Now we're just processing the file here. All right, awesome, it's done. Now we can go into the chat panel and we can actually have a conversation with the files that we just uploaded. So I just uploaded some FAQs for a made-up camping store, and I'm just gonna say, what are your open hours? All right, awesome, so we have our response. Now, one thing you'll note is that the Pinecone Assistant actually gives you a reference in the response, and it also links out to that reference too. So as a customer, you can actually click onto this and then see the uploaded PDF. If you wanted to, you could also programmatically remove this reference from your actual AI assistant so that you don't display any reference material to your customer. But that's it. So now we've created an assistant and we've just asked it a question and we know that it works. Okay, nice. And now our final step is to create the Voiceflow agent. Okay, so over in Voiceflow, just as we saw before, we only have 3 main blocks to build out. This first welcome block is just setting some variables that we're going to need for the Pinecone API call. and sending some static welcome messages. Next, we'll be making the actual API to Pinecone using a custom function that I built out. And I'll link to my GitHub repo. We can just copy and paste that function directly into Voiceflow. And finally, over here, we display the message from the Pinecone Assistant directly to the end user. Now, one thing I want to mention, we have this JavaScript step here, which if I open it up, so one thing we're doing is actually initializing a conversation history variable. So the one limitation of the Pinecone API is that it does not actually create a conversation thread for you. So every time you message the API, it's technically a brand new message. So in order to manage a conversation thread, you have to build a conversation history variable and then send that with the API call. That basically means that every time you send a new message to the agent and you receive a message back, you're just adding all those messages into a variable and you're sending that entire bundle of messages in the API call. If that sounds complex, don't worry about it because I've entirely managed that process for you in the custom function that I built out. Okay, so to recreate this, go to this logic step here. Let's grab this set block and plunk it on the canvas. Now let's call this welcome message 2. Now the first thing you want to do is go to this variable step and you now want to add these variables into your canvas. So since I already have these variables in my canvas, I'm not going to be adding them, but you would essentially go to create variable and then you would create a new variable for the Pinecone API. So you would go Pinecone lowercase and then capital A and then lowercase p and I and create variable. I've got an error because I've already got this created, but you will do this for the Pinecone API and then the assistant name. Now I'm going to explain what these are in a second, but just want to mention that when you add these variables into your canvas, make sure you use the exact same spelling and exact same case as what I've used here and here. And you also need to add a variable for the conversation history. Okay, so I'm just going to find those variables within my flow. So I'm going to go Pinecone API. I'm going to leave this empty for now. I'm going to add my next variable, which is the assistant name. And then I'm going to leave this empty for now as well. So now our next step is to go to this dev block here. Click it open and drag the JavaScript step onto the actual block as well. Now looking at this JavaScript step, if I plug it open, so we're just going to be copying this and pasting it into our JavaScript step. So I'm going to copy this, but you most likely have to pause the video. So I'm going to go to my new JavaScript block and paste it in. Now that's saved. Let me have some static messages like hi there and ask me a question. Okay, so let's go to the talk step, drag a message block in, and now let's write hi there, ask me a question. Awesome. And now we want to capture the user's response. So we're going to go to listen and grab a capture block, and that's it. So now the next thing we want to do is actually get this Pinecone API call. So I'm going to create a new pathway. I'm going to go down to dev. I'm going to go to function, and I'm going to call this Pinecone API call number 2. Okay, so let's press back and find functions, and let's create a new function. Now I'm going to just choose the hello world template. I'm going to call this Pinecone API. And I'm going to backspace this description. And I'm going to click create function. Next, I'm going to go to my GitHub. I'm going to go to repositories over here, and I'm going to click on Voiceflow-Pinecone-function. Click into Pinecone-function. And over here, we have the entire function that we're going to be copying and pasting into our Voiceflow function. Okay, so when we copy this function, make sure you copy from line 2 all the way to line 83. Now back in Voiceflow, we're going to copy this entire function and backspace it. And a quick note, you can see that the actual first line and last line stay within the function. That's why when we copy the function from my GitHub, we just copy from line 2 to line 83. So I'm going to paste the function in. Okay, so now we have to set up the input variables, the output variables, and the success and error paths. To set up the input variables, just copy all these variables here. So we have user message, assistant name, Pinecone API, and conversation history, and plug them directly into here. So I'm going to do that now. User message, assistant name, Pinecone API, and then conversation history. So let's add one more and add it here. Then if we scroll all the way down, we're going to see that we have some output variables, which is the conversation history and assistant message. So let's copy these and add them to the output variables. And finally, we can see that we have a success path and an error path. So let's copy error, go to paths, and then add it in. Okay, so to give you a run through of how this function works, first we're inputting the variables into this actual function. We're setting up conversation history as VAR, as a variable, so that we can actually change it within this environment. So if you set it as a constant, you're not going to be able to change this, you're going to throw an error. So that's why we're inputting it as a VAR variable, so that we can actually change the value of this as we append more messages to the conversation history. So then over here, we've got two different functions that do something to the conversation history. So when we first create the conversation history, we need to initialize it as an empty array. So in this function, if the conversation history doesn't already exist or it is empty, then we just initialize it as an empty array. But if it does exist and it's a string, then we've parsed that string so that we can use that variable inside this function. After these two things are sorted out, then we take the user message and append it to the conversation history variable. Then over here, we set up our API call, and you can see our message is the conversation history. So over here, we're trying the API call. And then we're waiting for the response from the API call to capture the actual response for the assistant. Over here, we're taking the response from the Pinecone Assistant and adding it to that conversation history variable. Once again, so we can have that thread of the conversation and keep sending it back to the Pinecone Assistant with each subsequent message. Now, if everything was successful in this try block, so if we made the API call, we were able to capture the response and we were able to add it to our conversation history. We take the success path and we push out the conversation history and the assistant message. When we push out the conversation history, we have to stringify it first, so that it's accepted on the Voiceflow canvas. Interesting note, that's why we parse it here. So we stringify it to get it out of this function, and then to enter it into this function and use it, we have to parse it. And finally, if anything fails in that try block, then we catch the error and we take the error path. All right, so let's go back to the Voiceflow canvas. Okay, now that we're back on the Voiceflow canvas, let's just select the Pinecone API function, which is this. Now let's map in all the variables. So conversation history, which we would have added as a variable to the Voiceflow canvas. Let's add that here. User message is just the last utterance that we captured from the user. Assistant name, let's add the variable here, and Pinecone API, let's add the variable here as well. And for the output message, the assistant message is a reply from the Pinecone Assistant. So we're saving that to the message variable, and conversation history, let's save to conversation history. All right, so now let's build the success path. So let's go to talk and message. And for the output message, we're just going to insert the variable message. So let's find that here, and that's it. And we also want to capture the next response from the user. It's going to get a capture step here. And finally, we're going to feed in this next question back into this API call. So let's go here, let's go to actions, go to block, and find the API call block, which is this here, Pinecone API call 2. Okay, awesome. So let me just detach this, bring the start block up here, and go into my welcome message. Now, before we can actually use this, we have to set the Pinecone API and assistant name. Okay, so back in our Pinecone dashboard, we're going to be in the assistants tab, and we're going to open up the assistant that we created before. So this is the actual assistant name. So let's copy this. And back in Voiceflow, let's go to assistant name and paste in the name like this. Now back in the Pinecone dashboard, let's go to API keys, create a new API key, and let's call this Voiceflow demo, create API key. Let's copy the value of the API key back in Voiceflow. Now let's paste it into the Pinecone API variable. Awesome. Now let's give this a run. What are your open hours? All right, and there you go. Now we've integrated the Pinecone Assistant directly into the Voiceflow agent. Okay, guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to my page. Drop a comment if there's anything else that you want to see, if you want a deeper dive into the Pinecone API. And once again, if you're a business owner and you want to work with me, you can find my contact information in the details of this video. Thanks, guys. See you later.